Today's episode is brought to you by Surfshark. If it feels like the internet is getting more dangerous by the second, and feel that hackers have more ways to target you, trackers are following your every move, and malware is hiding all over the web, luckily there is a solution. You can get a VPN. Essentially, it will hide your location and make you more difficult to identify and target. But privacy and security are not all that Surfshark has to offer. If you have a VPN, you will forget all about those pesky geo restrictions. Everything from news sources to social media apps that have become unavailable to you because of your location. All you need to do is change your virtual location and access all the entertainment you want safely and securely. And the best part is you can try out Surfshark completely risk-free because they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So get Surfshark VPN at surfshark.deals/TTD. And don't forget, enter promo code TTD for 83% off and 3 months free. But now, on with today's show. Now, since August last year, there has been so much talk about the Great Resignation. It's been almost impossible to avoid because employees all over the world are now seeking new opportunities. And businesses are having to reevaluate their workplace culture to improve employee retention and evolve their onboarding programs for new joiners. And there are so many people out there that have been recruited online, onboarded online, and now they're working online and have never met their colleagues face to face. So business leaders are frantically finding solutions to retain talent with new perks. But what we don't hear about much when talking about this Great Resignation narrative is how it's brought an increased number of IT challenges, especially associated with insider threats. Now, insider threats have become the new distinct challenge for organisations as they try to balance employee turnover, employee onboarding, and the use of non-sanctioned apps and platforms. And who would work in IT, right? I'm getting flashbacks from my IT past just talking about it. And the sheer number of employees leaving their jobs and potentially still having access to the network or a proprietary data is creating one big headache for IT and security teams tasked with protecting the organisations and being the guardians of the network. So today I've invited Rick McElroy, Principal Cybersecurity Strategist at VMware, and he's coming on to talk about how attackers are starting to target employees to carry out their attacks or plant ransomware on them. So as a result, we're going to need new protocols, guidelines, etc. in a way that can keep networks and sensitive data protected. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to San Diego, where Rick is waiting to speak with us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Rick. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Rick McElroy, Principal Cybersecurity Strategist for VMware Carbon Black. And I really work with customers and prospects all over the globe to help them mature what they're doing from a security perspective.
Fantastic. And something I always try and do with every guest, rather than just talk about their current success, I want to know more about your origin story, where your passion for tech and cybersecurity came from and what lit that spark. Can you remember what it was that put you on this path you're on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it really came down to my first video game console, which was an Atari, and actually like taking apart the cartridges themselves because I was fascinated, like how did this all work? Like you just stuck something into something else and it played a video game, and that sort of lit the spark. Yeah.
Man, we must be of a similar age. I remember that Atari console well. You remember that lovely veneer finish? That they treated games consoles beautifully back then, didn't they, the way they created them?
They really did. That wood grain is still something else.
Yeah, it really is. And of course, fast forward to 2022 and the Great Resignation is here and employees are seeking new opportunities and businesses have to reevaluate their workplace cultures to improve employee retention and evolve their onboarding programs for new joiners. But while business leaders are frantically looking for solutions to retain talent with these new perks, can I ask that you tell me a little bit more about the other side of the Great Resignation, and that is how it's brought, increased business IT challenges, especially associated with insider threats, because that's a side of the tale that we don't get to talk about that much, do we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, insiders act for a number of different reasons, but
Yeah.
I think the Great Resignation makes the risk elevated for a couple of reasons. One, there are a number of, I think, employees who are unhappy with their organizations, and I think adversaries are going to take advantage of that by either, fooling these employees because they're a little less careless and aren't putting as much thoughtfulness into the steps that they take to compute, or in some cases, I think those employees will be used as a vector for blackmail or for nefarious things like ransomware attacks to be launched. And we see cases where especially folks with system administrator privileges, security team folks are leaving, but the organization still needs them to do work. So they're opening up system administrator level accounts to folks who maybe are on a contract now or working, for a small period of time before they actually exit the org. So it just creates a larger risk for organizations.
And I suspect much of what you're talking about here will resonate with business leaders listening all over the world. And with these growing IT challenges associated with insider threats, how can businesses better respond to these new kind of threats?
Yeah, well, I think one thing to think about is really the way we build our security program, right? I'm pretty famous for saying it, and I'm not the only one. If you can catch insiders, you can actually stop all of the external malicious actors as well, because the technology you would need to put together the chain of events over what employees are doing inside of your environment is, in fact, the same contextual data that you would need to expose an entire attacker's kill chain. So I think as we start to think about building our programs, we have to really consider zero trust models here and the ability to have full visibility into the activities that both the people, process, and technologies utilize inside of an environment.
And a recent guest recommended a great book to me called "This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends," and it really opened my eyes to the motivations behind zero-day attacks, etc. But I'm curious, what are the motivations behind insider threats? And do you think these threats are just going to continue to rise as the year races on?
I think so, and part of it is, I don't want to kind of harp on employee loyalty, right? But I think it's incumbent on organizations to make sure that they're taking care of employees, to foster an environment where the employees feel like they are participating in the company. It's a family, right? And you're going to do things, I think, differently if you build an organization like that. Because your employees are going to care a little bit more. They're going to participate positively in security and not try to work around it. And so for me, I think it starts with the culture and really ensuring that you're really taking care of your employees, especially the ones that have increased access to systems. And again, having good verification controls that they're doing the right things as well.
And you made a great point a few moments ago about contractors that possibly arrive last minute and there's frantically they need a new access account, and the account might not have been set up, so they're given a sysadmin account, which can only end one way, in the wrong hands. So how can businesses ensure employees with legitimate access to business systems aren't using those same privileges for illegitimate reasons? Because yes, we need to trust the staff, but when we have people that are only in an organization for literally a handful of weeks or even days on some occasions, what's the best way around that?
Number one for me, it always starts with visibility, and visibility is really going to drive context. So you need to understand who's logging in, when, what are the resources that they normally access, and then when do they start to do something that's not normal. There's a number of wonderful technology solutions that can help with this, but top of mind for me starts with multi-factor authentication and good audit and logging over that multi-factor authentication, so you can begin to understand who your users are, the systems that they interact with, what they're doing, and start to, again, increase the visibility into this problem. And then, there's a lot of analytics around the insider problem as well, whether it's fueled by endpoint detection and response data or, systems like cloud access brokers who sort of show, all the visibility going into cloud environments as well.
And you mentioned zero trust a few minutes ago as well, and I think that is so important now. In the traditional world of IT, of course, trusted everything inside the organisation and distrusted everything outside, but we can't do that anymore. And I'm curious, as a result of that, do you think insider threats could potentially be more dangerous to a business than external threats? Do you think we're at that place yet?
Yeah, typically they are. And if you add up the overall cost of an insider breach, whether it's an accidental release of information, a malicious release of information onto the dark web or to someone nefarious, or in some cases, you've seen system administrators do everything from deletion of records and databases to really try to punitively punish the organization that they were a member of. So typically when you have that increased access, it's going to be a whole lot more painful when an attack occurs. And it's going to take you a whole lot longer to figure out what exactly happened, and then put a response. And so what I like to tell organizations is plan for that now. Start to put a tabletop exercise around what would you do if a system administrator, someone with elevated access to your system, decided to do rogue. That's a good place to start. And then you'll have a whole lot of technology and process that you'll have to deploy. But it's a good place to start to identify the problem.
And it's so important that we raise these issues. And there is a lot of danger and threats online, and we're seeing almost every day a different cyber breach of some sort. But what is it that makes you hopeful about the future?
I'm always hopeful about the momentum that we have in cyber, right? So I've been doing this 25 years, and I can assure people it's not the same fight we used to fight. In fact, when I started, people didn't know that cybersecurity was a job. You had to really explain it a lot. We've overcome that gap. And so I think the way I put it is we've moved out of the awareness phase. We're on mainstream media all the time. When you see these major breaches, it's talked about at the nation state level at this point. But I think we need to lean into the education portion, both for on the consumer side, specifically on the legislation side, and then for organizational leaders, where we really need to move out of awareness into education and then truly educate them on the things they need to do to have a positive impact on security.
And of course, one of the biggest cliches in the industry is humans are the weakest link in security. But by that very token, many businesses, they launch a compulsory awareness training video once a year where they just have to hit next for an hour and then forget about it. I'm curious, from everything that you're seeing and the conversations you're having with businesses around the world, is that changing now and how they educate their staff?
I think it is. And specific to the community, I think we've changed our conversation around employees, what we used to refer to as users on systems. And really what you need to do is flip that. Your employees should be your strongest asset. If you invest correctly, I think if you do a little bit better than the bare minimum with education, what you can actually start to do is push specific security knowledge out to the functions that are either during the ideation phase. So maybe it's a VP in the business who wants to start a new business line or create a new business application to get market penetration, or perhaps it's a engineer who's looking at developing that next new application for consumers that's going to be really awesome and cool, and everybody's going to want to take advantage of. Well, I think if security continues to exist in a centralized function, we'll probably continue to repeat the failed results that we have. But if you educate those folks, push those decisions out, and work with those teams, I think you can have a bigger impact on the problem than just telling people not to click on stuff.
And what about yourself and VMware? What was your big focus this year? I appreciate there's probably not too much you can share, but is there anything you can about the big focus for the year ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think we're keenly focused on providing security solutions in a multi-cloud world. So it's pretty typical that, for the last 20, 30 years, and obviously before the pandemic, a lot of security solutions were deployed into data centers. A lot of it, of the controls that we used existed based on floors in a building or individual systems that were wired into a system where you could microsegment. Well, all of that's broken down. And so I think for us, how can you effectively provide prevention, detection, and response across multiple cloud infrastructures in a uniform fashion we're keenly interested on driving some solutions to market there, and then having a really big impact for the security teams so that they can achieve consistency of control frameworks amongst all of these cloud providers. That's really what we're working on.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for joining me today. We started the podcast talking about your origin story and that Atari console that we both love. But as we come full circle, I want to see if we can leave the listeners on somewhat of an inspirational note. So I'm going to ask, is that a song, piece of music, movie, or book, or anything that has inspired or helped you in your career that you'd pass down to anybody listening around the world?
Yeah, this is an awesome question, so I appreciate you including it. I would say overall, I'm a pretty huge fan of the Wu-Tang Clan. So I would point to their entire catalog. It's something that, for the last 20, 30 years, I've enjoyed and still listen to today. On the movie side, I would definitely point people back to a really old movie from the 80s. It's called Cloak and Dagger. It's really the story of a kid who somehow finds himself in the midst of, this kind of Cold War effort that involved an Atari console. So it's really cool. And then finally, on the book side, highly recommend a book called Essentialism by Greg Minown. It'll really help you focus and I think eliminate some of the noise that you might feel in the cybersecurity industry and really focus on the key things that matter for moving the needle that you care about.
Well, I'll add that book to our Amazon wish list. I've got to ask, Cloak and Dagger, you've set off a few memories there, because I seem to remember that quite well. Did that star Henry Thomas from the E.T. movies too?
It did. It was Henry Thomas and Dabney Coleman, if you remember that actor.
Yes. Oh, yeah, he had a mustache. I remember that perfectly. Oh, man, what a film. And if I had to put you on the spot and say we've got one space on our Spotify playlist for a Wu-Tang Clan, what would be your go-to track?
Protect Your Neck.
Love it. Absolutely love it. I'll add that on there. And before I let you go, for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about anything we talked about, I appreciate VMware's a big site. Is there anywhere that you'd like to point anyone?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we call ourselves the Howlers. So look up the Howlers from VMware. You can find us on LinkedIn, at InfoSecRick on Twitter. We're always out there trying to drive collective wisdom.
Awesome.
So engage with us. We're pretty easy to find publicly. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll get that link on the show notes for everyone listening. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Yes, for talking about the growing IT challenges associated with insider threats and how businesses can respond to these new threats, but also for taking the time to share your origin story and also leaving us with a great track, book, and movie. It doesn't get any better than that. So thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
First of all, a big thank you to Rick. It was incredibly early for him in San Diego when he took my call for today's podcast. So kudos to him for coming on this show so early and talking about the growing IT challenges associated with insider threats and how businesses can begin to respond to this new threat, and also help me and hopefully everyone listening understand the motivations behind insider threats and how businesses can make sure employees with legitimate access to business systems aren't using that privilege for illegitimate reasons. And the thing that really blew me away from our conversation is why insider threats are beginning to be more dangerous to a business as external threats. And as we mentioned in the show there, it shows you the big transition from IT used to trust everyone inside the network, everybody inside the office on that corporate network, everyone is trusted and everything outside is distrusted. And as Rick said, there is this growing call for this zero trust approach now. But let me know your thoughts, your experiences, how you and your organisation are tackling this. You can do that by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can send me questions, pictures to come on the show, whatever it is. If you'd like to connect with me, if social media is more your thing, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, but don't hit the follow button. Send me a little note as well. Let me know you listen to the podcast, so I know you're not just part of that team follow back gang, and you know who you are. So connect with me. Send me your messages, and if you've got nothing to say, how about you just join me here, same time, same place tomorrow, and we'll do it all again. So a big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.